Monterey County. Lisa is homesick with 101 fever. And she sends her apologies, but I said, don't come, we don't want to get sick. And you need to be in bed. So I'm just delighted you're all here. This is a very exciting day. And any of you go ahead. It's interesting, my husband and I were talking with a 34-year-old who lives in Denver and saying, isn't it great? And she was like, yeah, I don't know, I won't believe it until he's in jail and he'll squirrel out of it. I was like, no, the justice system works. So, I don't know, we have a lot to do to convince these young people. You know, she's a voter. So people are going to continue to arrive for a while. I'd like to welcome you all. Can you hear me okay?
No, well, I was going to try to steal your seat.
At least one elected official, Eda Banuelos. Would you raise your there? From Soledad City Council member. And Allison, you're a former mayor of Delray Oaks. You want to raise your Are there other elected officials who are here who escaped our notice? We really care about wanting to hear your feedback and ideas. We invite you to give any suggestions that you have for us, events, topics that you'd like us to address, ideas for ways that we can do things better, and any other general suggestions. And Margie Kay has a suggestion box there. Please put your ideas in there. The other thing is, we're a political organization, and so if you're thinking about running for any kind of office coming up, this is the time for you to identify yourself and learn how to do it. Our organization supports candidates, Democrats, who want to, so please consider running. And even in things like school board or things that are not political, they're always political. And so it's really important to do that. Filing applications for all elected offices, for open city council, and for special district seats begin July 15th. And end August 9th. That's not very long from now. There is a November 5th, 2024 election calendar that can be found under candidates on the Monterey County election website. We will have our own endorsement process that we've been doing regularly. It will start in August once we have know who all the candidates are. And we will send details to you. Now I know there's at least one candidate in the office. Stand up and tell us. Name and what you're running for.
I'm Celia Barbarina. I work in California Community Colleges for 25 years, so I will work for free now if I'm elected to MPC trustee.
Yay! I'm Eva Banuelos. I'm actually appointed at this time, but I'll be running for council in November.
I got flyers for Jean Rash, who's running for District 3 for Monterey City Council. So if you're in the Monterey Vista upper end of it and Skyline, or you know people who are there, the flyers are over there. Thank you.
Excellent. So I hope our next events, we will have more people standing up and identifying themselves. So as we're preparing for the upcoming general election, there are many opportunities to volunteer your services to help get out the votes. You can go to the DWMC website to volunteer and get out the votes tab and learn different ways. We have two lifetime members here, Margie Kay and Margaret Goodman, who volunteer their time on writing letters. And I've asked Margaret, I'm going to actually bring this to you, if you would just, okay, to talk about what you do.
Okay, I wanted to just start off with a little bit of history. I've always been an active Democrat. I was living in a suburb of Philadelphia where I was even a member of the Democratic Committee for the county. And when we moved to Canterbury Woods in Pacific Grove, I was delighted to learn that we had a letter writing group started by Karen Paul. Everybody here knows about Karen. She and we all wrote a lot of letters in 2020. Karen, of course, now is very busy with the water district, so I have taken over. And this year, it's really easy to get people to write letters because everybody's terrified. And all I can say is, if you're interested in writing letters, I can certainly give you the name of our coordinator to get you on a mailing list because they have evidence that it makes maybe a % difference, but a % is a big deal in this election. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your work. This is so important. So just to have in mind, our next event is going to be on June 27th. The title is The Women Who Saved the Monterey Bay. Decades of work on the Monterey Bay, and it's going to be featuring Steve Columbi, who is the former director of the Hopkins Marine Station, and Fio Renza Michelli, who is the current co-director of Hopkins, and they'll be presenting the history of saving the bay. This is going to be a luncheon at Hilton, where we often meet, and we'll be sending out information about that very soon. Allison, I was wondering, has an announcement and discussion.
I just want to reiterate the power of people running for local elections. There is you may or may not be familiar with the Monterey New Progressives. They're a group that are looking for really good folks to run for office, and they will be having a training, a how-to training on June 8th, Saturday, June 8th. Even if you're just a little bit interested, come to me, let me know, I can get you an invitation. It's just more power for you to have and more knowledge for you to have, even when you're ready to run. Because we have some boards that are coming up this November where there's 3 spots open, and that is powerful to be able to change dynamics on boards. I'll just have to say it, the airport board, we could use you. And there are a couple of others. So tied to the women, I mean, to have the Democratic women behind you and the progressives behind you, there's money, there's support, there's letter writing, there's all kinds of things. So please consider it. We need really good people. Thank you.
So this evening's conversation is about a very important topic, which has, especially since COVID, become at the forefront of our consciousness: mental health and well-being. A 2023 study indicated that half of adult Americans feel lonely, and over 700,000 people die by suicide worldwide each year, more than half of whom are under the age of 50. Pre-pandemic, nearly 1 billion people struggled with a diagnosable mental health condition, dying 10 to 20 years earlier than the general population. The pandemic had a confounding effect, globally increasing the prevalence of depression and anxiety. Needless to say, what is occurring on the global level is also occurring right here in Monterey County. And we're very honored to have mental health leaders with us this evening. And I had the good fortune of being able to moderate a conversation with them. And I'd like to give you a little bit of my background. So I'm a retired clinical psychologist, was on the faculty at Southern Oregon University in Ashland for 29 years. I helped start our mental health counseling program, where I taught individual and group counseling, human development, and professional ethics. I also had a clinical practice in New York and in Michigan and also in Oregon, where I worked with clients from the age of 3 to 80. So I have a broad experience. Upon retirement in 2016, my husband Michael and I moved to Pacific Grove, where soon after I joined the DWMC, and I now serve as Vice President on the board. It's now my honor to introduce our speakers. So, Regina Mason is a retired child welfare social worker supervisor with extensive experience supervising Monterey County's child welfare investigators. She served on the death review team to determine if child deaths in Monterey County were preventable. She also represented Monterey County as a member of the Bay Area Supervisors, overseeing policy issues and best practice approaches to the field of child welfare. Regina has dedicated her career to addressing systemic issues within the welfare system, particularly institutionalized racism and culturally incongruent practices. She has worked tirelessly to enhance family preservation and ensure culturally affirming practices. And she is the co-founder of the Village Project with her husband, Mel, who is here, that is focused on providing culturally congruent mental health services, particularly for people of African ancestry and the broader BIPOC LGBTQ plus community. She co-authored a research project, the Saturday School for Children of African Ancestry in grades K through 4, that is funded by the California Department of Public Health, Office of Health Equity. The project has demonstrated both efficacy and significant cost savings, and allows providers to compete for funding on the same level as other evidence-based practices. Regina's commitment to community service is further underscored by her role as past president of the Monterey County NAACP, a long-term youth advisor, and multiple awards from state and local bodies. Regina continues contributing to enhancing the well-being of underserved populations in Monterey County. Stacie Andrews serves as the Executive Director of the Village Project, with a commitment to empowering youth from BIPOC and LGBTQ+ backgrounds. Her mission revolves around supporting historically underserved families and communities through equitable resource allocation and programming. As Executive Director, she spearheads grant writing, fosters organizational partnerships, and nurtures her fellow emerging leaders within the agency. Stacie grew up on the Monterey Peninsula and attended Monterey Peninsula schools, and later earned her Bachelor of Arts in Human Communications with a focus on African Studies from CSUMB in 2014. After obtaining her Master of Social Work from Arizona State University in 2021, and a graduate certificate in nonprofit management and leadership the following year, she immersed herself in leadership development through the LEAD Lead Institute during her first year as Executive Director of the Village Project. Stacie's journey with the Village Project began in 2009 when Regina and Mel Mason invited her to be the first tutor in the After School Academy, later returning as an AmeriCorps Fellow in 2016 to strengthen volunteer networks, then becoming the outreach and engagement coordinator as well as the executive assistant in 2020. Dr. Emily Gray completed her undergraduate and medical school training at the University of California, San Diego. Her residency was also at UCSD, and she completed her child fellowship at Harvard's MGH McLean program. She stayed on as faculty at Harvard for several years, specializing in eating disorders and the interface of psychiatry and gastrointestinal conditions, prior to returning to UCSD for 5 years as Associate Professor of Psychiatry and Medical Director of the Child Adolescent Eating Disorder Program. She joined Ohana 3.5 years ago, eager to help build programs that put families at the center of care. Dr. Gray is the Medical Director of Quality and Higher Level of Care Programs at Ohana. What an accomplished group of women, and it's my honor to welcome you all to DWMC. Before we begin, you'll notice that on your table there are cards and pens for questions. During tonight's discussion, some of my sister board members, Margie and Frederica, will be walking around the room to collect your questions. They'll organize them and then pass them on to me for our guests. So, I'm going to move. And let me start by saying the other thing that I think is notable for tonight, or for today, is that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So this is a fitting topic for our focus. Mental health issues are often stigmatized and kept in the shadows, yet in many ways it's the cornerstone of well-being for individuals, families, and communities. The organizations and individuals we're highlighting today are providing essential services to groups that have often been marginalized, the African American community and children and adolescents. And I'd like to begin with some background about your different organizations. I'm going to start with the Village Project, because you were founded in 2008 to provide counseling and therapy to underserved communities in Seaside. The Village Project offers culturally appropriate mental health services, educational support, and social advocacy to adults, youth, and children. Their approach considers the community and social experiences of their clients, such as racism, sexism, homophobia, and other forms of discrimination and oppression. I'm wondering if we could start with you talking about what motivated the founding of the Village Project, and will you share a brief history of the organization?
So the Village Project came to fruition in 2008, but prior to that, I'm a lifelong resident and member of the Seaside community and have lived here all of my life. I've been involved in social justice issues since my youth. And I really started to see a need for culturally appropriate services just based on my own experiences with my childhood and going to schools where children were underserved and so on and so forth. And so throughout my tenure, I decided I'm going to go into the field of child welfare. And so I happened to be married to a person who's a former member of the Black Panther Party. And so he too is a social worker. And so we were doing a lot of volunteer community work in Seaside with people that were in need of services. And so when the Mental Health Services Act came to fruition, we decided that it's time for us to step up to the plate and create something for people of African ancestry. And while we serve people from every background, that population had nowhere to go to get their mental health well-being needs met. So we had a focus group in the community that consisted of social workers, family members, just a lot of different people. And out of that came a mental health clinic called the Village Project. We actually went through an agency called the Action Council for Monterey County before we got our fiscally sponsor us. And then in 2008 we became incorporated, and that's when we opened our doors. And we've been going strong ever since, but I don't want to hog up a lot of the time, but I will touch on many other areas. By the way, BIPOC means, Black Indigenous people of color, and that's a term that we use to describe people of color, including Black people. So, and then we also, from day one, we always wanted to ensure that we met our families where they were, and it was never, oh, this is the modality we're going to provide to you. It's about looking at our, we don't call our people clients, we call them warriors, because we do strengths-based work with our warriors. So that's just a little bit of our, how we actually got started, is that both Mel and I are social workers, and we have a responsibility, we believe, to give back to community, especially those that are extremely unserved, underserved, and inappropriately served.
So our other organization represented here is the Ohana Center for Children and Adolescent Mental Health Care, which is much newer, although it's been around a while. So it opened its doors at the end of November in 2023, thanks to a generous donor, Bertie Elliott. So Ohana is a Hawaiian word that means family in the broadest sense, extended family, community, and it's a founding principle for the center. So Emily, would you share what motivated the founding of Ohana and a brief history of the organization?
Yes. So just a mild correction. So the transformational gift that Bertie Elliott gave was back in 2018, and so yes, it's true that Ohana entered our Ohana campus this past winter 2023. We've actually opened our doors and been delivering services since 2019. So just as well as the origin of the gift, and from what I've heard, Bertie Elliott and the hospital leadership at Community Hospital in Monterey Peninsula came together, and Bertie Elliott designated that she wanted to make a transformational gift and specifically picked child mental health as a key area, which I have to say is really quite unique. Most other communities, when these kind of gifts are given, bring that money to other areas of focus. So it was quite transformational. And her only stipulation was to call it Ohana and ensure that families were at the center, and the broader sense of families, meaning our whole communities. So making sure that everyone felt that they were welcome to enter care at Ohana, as well as us extending out into the community and fostering those community ties and empowering our community resources. So really being a great partner to the existing agencies that have much more historical kind of context in our area. We didn't want to be redundant or repetitive. We wanted to be additive and synergistic. So working with our community partners.
To go further with each of these organizations, I'm wondering if you could address what are the range of issues and treatment options that are available. Maybe we could start with the Village Project.
So, as Ms. Regina mentioned, like, culture is really at the heart of what we do. Community is at the heart of what we do. And so we really meet people where they are. We have people who come to us, they're dealing with being unhoused, they are dealing with the impact of the war on drugs in the community, they are dealing with being lower socioeconomic, all these historical systemic factors that impact their mental health. We've had individuals come in to see us who are dealing with borderline personality disorder, depression, anxiety. One of my favorite things that I know Mel has told me before is in some of the therapy practices that he's done is he really takes in the person's culture. So whether that is invoking the ancestors with one of our warriors or doing therapy in a sweat lodge with somebody who is indigenous. We are very flexible, we meet them where they are to help facilitate that therapeutic journey with them. But in things like CBT and motivational interviewing and things like that as well, but really taking into account their culture, who the person is, who their systems of support are. I don't know.
So would you talk a bit more? Also, you have like programs for like educational support programs as well, and the Saturday program.
So yeah, sorry, I was going more mental health. But all of our programs have a therapeutic component. We were founded solely to provide mental health services. But when the community was coming to us and being turned away or being told that they don't have the resources or they didn't feel comfortable at those spaces, Ms. Regina, Mr. Mel, they set out to write grants. So none of our programs started without community input. So the after-school program came out of us seeing students who were falling through the cracks academically, as well as dealing with some mental health issues, disproportionately being disciplined in their schools. So in 2009, we opened the After School Academy to provide psychosocial, educational, and enrichment support to them. And so we have seen a major shift in the way that they are able to self-regulate, redirect themselves. They go from, not passing in their classes to going and passing with B's, A's, or those high marks. We've seen Eminyata also make a huge difference in people's academics as well. There was one young man.
Could you explain that a little bit?
Yes, and I'll actually let the co-writer, Eminyata, explain it.
So in addition to, we have various modalities of therapy. We have equine therapy, play therapy, art therapy, and so on and so forth. However, one of the things that Stacie mentioned is that we do meet people where they're at, and we didn't start out to create 13 other programs within our mental health clinic. They were absolutely born out of a need, an unmet need in the community. We actually, when people come to us to get a service and we don't provide that service, we refer them and link them to other resources in the community. And then they come back to us and they say they cannot help me. And we're like, what? I can't help you. So what we do is this Eminyata is a research-based project out of the Office of Health Equity, and it's a Saturday school for children of African ancestry in grades K through 4th. And what we do with Eminyata is we teach children their cultural heritage, and we actually take them all the way back to Kemet in Africa. And we have routines, habits, and rituals that are culturally affirming. And speakers fly in from all over the country. We didn't have the Maasai warriors come in to impart their knowledge and wisdom. And these children come in not knowing their cultural identity. And we take this upstream approach, meaning we're not waiting until they get into high school to learn that, oh, there was only slavery and that's what the people were. No, our ancestors helped to create civilization. And the kids learn all of that from professional people that look like them. And as I said, they come in from all over. We have psychologists, we have airline pilots, just you name it, from different professions. But one of the things about Eminyata is the children are very young. So the speakers are They do a task-oriented engagement with the students so that they're not lecturing to the students, but they're physically engaged in, so if it's an architect, they will show children how to build a house. And the kids will participate in that. And then the other thing about Imanata is that, well, we're in it was only supposed to be for 5 years, but because of the pandemic, we had to pivot to an online virtual platform. And so therefore, we were able to have people from even further reach throughout the world to impart their knowledge to the young warriors. And one thing that happened is we wanted to make sure that Imanata did not go away. And so we are part of 35 BIPOC LGBTQ+ organizations in the state of California that provide culturally affirming practices to their various groups. So there's, Asian Pacific Islanders, Hmong groups, you name it, there's everyone. Whenever we have a person present to us that is from a different culture, we have 35 organizations to pull from. We also have, so Imanata is, for every $1 spent, the community saves $5, the government saves $5. Our research was, the statewide research was from Loyola Marymount, from a scientist, Dr. Cheryl Grills and her team, and the research is now published, and it is very telling. And so during the pandemic, Governor Newsom, we advocated through state legislators to committees just all over the state of California. And they refunded all of our organizations for an additional 4 years. So we're going into our 8th year starting in September. And in 2026, that funding will run out. But I have a sneaky suspicion that because of all of the groups that have been able to advocate their congresspeople and so on and so forth, that I think it will not ever end, because this is a project that has proven that children that go through Imanata are doing way better than they would have. This research has shown that one of the things that we wanted to prove, because we have a local evaluator as well. She lives in the Bay Area, but she graduated, she was a class valedictorian at Seaside High. She went on to Stanford, and she's a research scientist. And so we tapped into her because she's from the community, and because of her research work, she's worked in the government administration under the Obama administration, other nationally recognized organizations. And so,
well, we want to hear from Emily and Ohana, so maybe you can talk also about what Ohana provides and what the breadth of the services that you provide.
Yes, and really with the gift that that Bertie Elliott gave, there was an intentionality of thinking about the breadth of services. And so Ohana really goes through all levels of care. So we have programs that are in the emergency department. We have a crisis stabilization. Our lead crisis psychiatrist is in the audience, Dr. Veronica Searsquick. But we have a crisis stabilization unit that meets families on their worst day when their child is going through a crisis. And Ohana provides services all throughout the continuum of care. So we have that crisis stabilization unit. On our Ohana campus, we will be opening our residential unit, which children come overnight and stay 24 hours, 7 days a week to receive intensive services when they're not safe to be at home and need that extra monitoring and support. So that unit will open August of 2024, so just in a few months. And we offer our day treatment programs, which are basically school hours, so 6 hours a day. Children and adolescents are coming in lieu of school, coming to mental health care for really intensive services, but they go home to their own beds at night. And we really believe that healing happens at home. And so we really want children to be able, and adolescents to be in their home with their caregivers, in their community, healing in that environment. I will say we bring families into our care, and the families just walk along in parallel their child as they're receiving services. So we really believe in equipping the families with the same tools that we're talking about with the adolescents, about emotion regulation, distress tolerance, because if any of you have parented a child in crisis, you need to tap into those skills to be at your best. And we have intensive outpatient services, outpatient services, which is more what people are familiar with in terms of going to your weekly therapy appointments or your monthly appointments with your psychiatrist. And then really what's innovative about Ohana is we're swimming upstream as well, thinking about prevention. And we're investing in prevention efforts. And we're going so upstream that we're talking about perinatal health and really focusing with mothers and fathers and all parents when they're about to start their family, and then those early months when they're caring for their newborn. We know that 6-month period is so critical, and so making sure we're investing in the mental health of the parents. And so this year our prevention program is going to launch a perinatal program so that we can provide care for those new parents when we know that window period is so critical. In terms of diagnoses, we are broad scope, so transdiagnostic. We open our doors to all patients and families coming with a variety of presentations. We offer an evaluation service that is really unique. It has its roots in the Vermont family-based model, where we really look at not only the individual, but noting, as Winnicott said, there's no such thing as a baby, meaning you can't look at a child in isolation. You have to bring in their caregivers, and so we do a whole family-based assessment to really come with an assessment that incorporates the whole family's perspective. It's really unique. The caregivers kind of give assessments of each other and the children, so you really get a 360 degree of the child and the family to think about what does this family need in this moment. Do we have it here, or are we going to be looking outside with our community partners to give them the best care that they need? And so I'll stop there to give us time to.
Great. So both the Village Project and Ohana are focused on providing services that are evidence-based. What that means in general terms is that your services are not just intuitive, but rather rely on a body of research that demonstrates the effectiveness of your approaches. How does the Village Project use evidence-based approaches? And then I'll ask the same for Ohana.
So our evidence-based approaches, you can go to SAMHSA and there's tons of evidence-based approaches to use. We are, with our Imanata research project, we use community-defined evidence-based practices. And so the community has defined that through all the body of research that we've done. And so our approach is to, again, we don't pathologize our families. We take a lot of time. I know that in Eurocentric ways of doing things, when you first meet someone, they come into a clinic and you do a psychosocial assessment. Well, with our population, they're very guarded and they don't want intrusiveness into their culture. And so we take time to get to know the family just by meeting them where they're at and listening. And the families generally know how to resolve their issues. They may just be going through a crisis in the family. A lot of the families that we work with and children are experiencing institutionalized racism. And that is the #1 issue that's happening with many of the warriors that come before us. And so, again, the community-defined evidence practices are what we use. And if you go to the website of the California Office of Health Equity, you'll see all of those bodies of evidence laid out there. We do use some of SAMHSA's as well.
And how about Adolescent?
Yeah, well, we use evidence-based treatments where there is evidence for, but there are so many areas in child and adolescent psychiatry where the evidence is still growing. It's these innovative programs in the community that we're still learning from. And so as medical director of quality, I'm really focused on finding treatments that work. And so what we do at Ohana is we couple our treatments, not only our assessments, but our treatments with measurement-based care. So we're tracking how we're doing. Are we hitting the goals that we collectively established early on? And these are goals that the family has defined. That what would well look like in your child? What's going wrong? You know, a lot of times families are looking to see that smile come back. So it's really clearly defining the goals in the family's terms and connecting them with the treatment modality that the research has supported. So we, and I will say we've heavily invested in this because these are therapies that take a long time to learn, and you need constant supervision and peer supervision to make sure you're delivering them in a way that is effective and motivating or getting that hook. So depending on the diagnosis, we have various treatments. So if I think about for our patients who are coming with PTSD, oftentimes similar kind of meeting them where they're at, seeing is it time to do the trauma work or do we need to deliver some skill-based work, meaning and build up those internal resources so they can tolerate the deep dive that the trauma work would have to take. So we've invested in dialectical behavioral therapy, which is really critical for many youth and families that are struggling with persistent thoughts of self-harm or suicide ideation. So equipping them with skills first before maybe we do the deeper dives. For our episodic mood presentations, so major depressive disorder or bipolar disorder, we're leaning on cognitive behavioral therapy. When there is more conflict within the family, we use interpersonal therapy, which really relies on the individual's strengths and value system instead of more of a cognitive heavy or behavioral heavy. In our anxiety domains, we use exposure and response prevention. With our eating disorder patients, we have brought in family-based treatments and really investing in our families and equipping them with the confidence and the competency that they've had all along. It's just more kind of invigorating what may have felt dormant when they were going through the crisis. And then I could go on to our other diagnoses, but for like ADHD, we really equip families with the incredible years. So really what we're trying to do is really think about the different diagnoses and what is the evidence-based approach that people would have to travel miles or across states to access in other communities outside of their home. And we're investing at Ohana, bringing those here so people can get well in their home, in their communities, and not having to travel across the country. Previously, when I was at UCSD, families traveled internationally to receive that treatment. And what we found is it just actually, by nature of the pandemic, we found families did much better virtually because they were at home and they were cooking their food. And so just really investing in that home-based and that family orientation into our treatments, but bringing in those modalities that have been tried and tested, and making sure everyone gets access to those. So they're not improving because they didn't have access.
Thank you. So the last formal question I have, and then we'll go to audience questions. Since the DWMC is a political organization, our audience might want to know about how politics and policy impact your work. Are there particular policy or funding issues either supporting the Village Project or creating challenges? For example, Prop 1 squeaked by. Is that creating issues? And we also have a statewide deficit that we're trying to solve.
Yeah, Prop 1 is definitely something that is going to impact a lot of our organizations. I know myself and some people from Ohana were on a mental health steering committee with the Community Foundation, and when that happened, a lot of us were very concerned prior to it being passed. I know with the California Reducing Disparities Project, Regina, Mel, and others have been really active in the work to just even prevent getting Prop 1 as a bill. Some of the things that they were trying to pass in last minute were going to be pretty bad, and so we rallied together and they were able to remove certain things from Prop 1 that were going to further impact us. I think a lot of us who are funded through the county behavioral health right now are concerned because a lot of our prevention and early intervention dollars are coming from that. And that does a lot of, that funds a lot of the great work that we're able to do with youth in the community now. As far as programs that support us, well, the Community Reducing Disparities Project, that is a great one. That's one that we have been funded for many years. That's helping us with the different research. The Children's, Youth, and Behavioral Health Initiative, we were funded by 3 different grants recently. However, because of the May vision and the governor's decision to put that on the chopping block, we may not be able to carry out these programs to the extent that we originally thought. We did get some better news this morning. Hopefully, at least one of the CYBHI programs will be funded. We're hoping all of them will be funded throughout, but a lot of the budget issues are looking at mental health right now, and that coupled with Prop 1 is severely going to impact us.
Can you talk about what Prop 1 is? I'm sorry.
So it's a ballot initiative that was put before the voters, and it's really a bond, and it's going to change the face of the Mental Health Services Act to cut out the PEI funding, and the funding is no longer going to go to the counties, it's going to go to the Department of Healthcare Services. And so I don't know, well, obviously most of you are voters in here, so you probably voted for or against Prop 1, but we rallied at the state level with all 35 organizations, plus, you know, the National Association of Social Workers and just all of these groups across the state of California. And we have lobbyists in Sacramento that are there right now with all of the May revise and budget cuts that are happening. It seems like the things that are getting cut the most are services to poor people. And so, you know, with people of African ancestry, they are used to not having anything. So for us, it's just another battle that we've had to fight, and we're in battle mode all the time, which is really unfortunate. But our ego functioning allows us to do that, but it doesn't allow everybody to do that, especially if you're living unhoused and you don't know where your meal's going to come from. You have children, you have a grandparent raising a child. So, you know, all those things are looked at by our agency especially, but we work across all different populations in California, and we're really lobbying at the state level to make sure that those funding impacts are going to be lessened by and there's a commercial right now where Governor Newsom is there saying he's never going to cut mental health for children, and yet he did slice it. And so that is something that is being played all over California at this point. So I think that has influenced his changing of restoring some of those fundings. But Prop 1 is really just going to impact the prevention and early intervention and the money that's getting allocated to the counties. And there are 58 counties in the state of California that are all impacted, and most of those counties are providing these types of services that we're providing free of charge to very underserved, unserved, and inappropriately served people.
Yeah, a lot of what Prop 1 is going to do is it's going to take a lot of funding from community-based organizations who are currently doing a lot of the mental health work. It's a lot of it, I think, because we're trying to solve homelessness. So this prop is really taking mental health and homelessness, but it's going to funnel the money to maybe like larger entities who are able to house individuals who are going through, you know, major mental health crises. But the work that a lot of the agencies are doing are really programs that can help prevent some of the homelessness that we're seeing. It's helping support children who are dealing with being unhoused. It's helping with some of the mental health issues that people who are unhoused are dealing with. So it's like, as Ms. Regina said, it's really going to kind of turn the mental health stuff on its head. And personally, I don't think it's going to be for the better.
So, and how about at Ohana? Is that impacting you?
Well, I think we have to acknowledge that Ohana is in a very privileged place where we had a benefactor that gave us the transformational gift. Recognizing that our larger societal and governments aren't supporting this, and so an individual stepped forward to do that. So we're in a place of privilege right now because we aren't, we're not needing and utilizing government funds for our programming or for our revenue building. However, we are deeply invested in our community, and we are very much concerned about the impact it will have on the patients and the families that we serve. And I really just learned a tremendous amount more about Prop 1 than I had before. It's hard to know how something impacts things unless you follow the money. And for most of us, like getting into the weeds of where it goes, it's very, very difficult to be an informed voter, because you look at a proposition and on the surface it says, oh yeah, I want to end homelessness, I want to help support mental health, and also on the surface it looks quite promising. However, again, when you follow those budget strings and those ties, I think when you saw the communities and the programs that were going to be deeply impacted, and you saw that they were rallying against it, it spoke volumes to myself and others who weren't necessarily privy to all the budgets and the funding sources for these programs. So thank you.
So we're going to shift and go to some of the questions from the audience. The poor populations of Monterey County are in North County and South County. Are there programs in these areas that you're aware of? Or can people come from their area too?
So we serve the entire Monterey County, and we have people from those two cities that we serve. We have community health workers that are working for our organization through June, and they're all over the county as well. So we serve the entire Monterey County.
Ohana as well. When you look at the distribution of where families are coming from, it's where families are. And so the majority of our families are actually outside of the peninsula in our larger county, because that's where our families are living and working. And so we're servicing all corners of our county. We do have a lot of out-of-county interest as well. So other, like Santa Cruz County, a lot of individuals are wanting to make the drive down because other counties don't have an Ohana. But as of right now, we're really restricting our access to the Monterey County and making sure we're able to provide services to our large county.
How do we get more mental health professionals in the schools? My understanding is that Monterey County schools have this need.
I think creating pathways for people from the community to be able to go to school, I think representation matters. I think it's important for people to be able to see themselves in these positions. So having Black and brown professors, having Black and brown educators who are encouraging youth to go to school, to get their degrees, and to come back to their communities and help out. I think in terms of people like currently, one, funding, being able to pay them a livable wage. Housing is an issue. I mean, we have $1 million homes being built behind us, surrounded by people living in mobile homes. And so you're seeing these disparities here. So housing, I think, is our biggest issue to bring people in. It's kind of a running joke sometimes. I think that, you become a social worker not to make money. Nobody enters this field, oh, you're gonna be poor as a social worker. And that's not necessarily the case, and it doesn't have to be the case, but I think when you prioritize funding for these things, then you'll have people entering these fields.
At Ohana, I did emphasize that when we were talking, when I mentioned our prevention efforts, at Ohana, we are partnering with the Monterey Peninsula Unified School District and targeting specifically the middle school age, knowing that that is a critical window period of intervention. I know most of us are like, oh, middle school, that sounds like the worst place to go. But actually, that is a magic time for brain development. And the interventions that you can deliver at that age have huge trajectory changes. Versus later on, like you were saying with your projects of targeting, even younger age elementary school, these window periods are quite critical. And so we're targeting the middle school age and delivering our mental fitness. So mental fitness is this idea of fostering habits, healthy habits at an early age prior to any onset of illness. And so we're investing at Monterey, like I said, the Monterey Peninsula Unified School District. And our goal is to grow that program. I believe we have 2 clinicians right now, but to grow that program to other school districts and start to collect data to show that these interventions are effective. It just takes a long time to prove a prevention effort. You have to track kids for so long. And oftentimes, the period of these grants are so limited that oftentimes the funding dries out, and then you see all the benefits many years later, and you're like, well, that program was awesome, like, let's bring it back in. But it's the program has already lost its way because of that dried up funding source. So what we're trying to do is also similar, trying to collect that data to prove that this prevention is worth it. And again, because we have this tremendous precious gift, a large part of our programming is in the prevention arena, because oftentimes those are not funded by insurance companies or other sources of revenue.
We've also had partnerships with MPUSD where we've had social workers housed in the various schools, and we now have a violence interrupter that goes to all of the schools that then brings information back and works with the school district to determine what the needs are and how to prevent issues from happening. And oftentimes parents have a lack of trust at the schools, and so I think that most of the schools in MPUSD do have social workers on site. I go to some of the schools myself doing therapy, but the issue with school is parents have a tenuous relationship oftentimes, because many children of color experience a lot of school to prison pipeline type issues, and so there's always a conflict. Not always, but more times than not, where children aren't reading at grade level. Parents have kids that are being put into special ed, and that's another thing we do is advocate for special ed families, because they shouldn't really be in special ed in the first place, because if they put resources into the child. So basically though, the schools do have social workers and mental health practitioners in just about all of the schools, and that's really a high priority right now for them. And at the state level, funding has been allocated to the schools for that purpose.
Majority of the children in the community are on Medi-Cal. Can we, encourage and support Ohana? Does Ohana accept Medi-Cal and uninsured patients?
Not yet, with yet being the key word. I will say our emergency room and our crisis stabilization unit does. So any family that is in crisis can come to CHOMP and have access to our crisis stabilization unit. And then we provide free of charge bridge services. So making sure once families leave the hospital, that they get connected to the current existing services. I want to emphasize how valuable that program is. And again, Ohana is doing this free of charge, meaning we want to invest in making sure care gets connected and that no one falls through the cracks. I will say that we are in talks with the county to really think about how to partner well to have Ohana be included in services. I will say Medi-Cal does not typically fund some of the levels of care that we offer. However, I come from a different county in California that we were able to be quite creative with our single case agreements, and so I'm really optimistic that Ohana, because it is such a mission of ours to serve all our families. Again, we don't want to be redundant and we don't want to be repetitive with any services that exist, but we want to be synergistic and augment other services. So what other services don't exist, we want to be able to have access for all our patients and families. And I will say too, if I had our head of prevention, we do offer free community-based workshops through our prevention. So all of our prevention efforts are free of charge. Those aren't billable services. All families are able to access them. So most of those are our perinatal services, so our caregiver, our fathers groups, our new mothers groups, but also we have raising resilient children, raising resilient adolescents. So we're offering some education groups, but the term is yes.
So, and this actually could be a question for both places. How does a family who cannot afford transportation get to your organization? With Village Project.
We have, for our after school program at least, right now we have 2 vans that pick up students from I think about 18 schools on the peninsula right now to bring them to our program. Back in the day, we got to utilize a church van. Sometimes we utilized our cars, but we made sure we were going to get them to the site. For therapy, same thing. If they cannot get to us, we can give them a bus pass. We have case managers who can go and pick them up and bring them to services. We also utilize our after-school vans to bring students down from the after-school site to therapy. A lot of our students are in therapy who attend our after-school academy. So we somehow find a way to get them to services if they really cannot get there.
Some of our grants that we write for outside of the county funding and state funding have that in mind. So we recently, through the Monterey County Gives, acquired a new hybrid, and that can transport families to both equine therapy in Carmel Valley or to wherever they need to go, including therapy.
I don't want to put our our manager of our family care managers on the spot, Kathleen Guerrero, but I know she would answer this question with much more detail. But what I will say is we similarly have a team of family care managers, which are social workers that are deeply connected with all our families and look to identify any barriers. And the creativity that comes out of that care is tremendous. So gas cards, bus passes, I'm not going to be able to name everything, but we don't want transportation to ever be a barrier. I will say too, with the access of telehealth, that enables so many families the ability to access care from pretty remote areas. And I will say families drive so far. And so a lot of our services are offered virtually. That's one benefit of the pandemic. Insurance companies finally covered telehealth. And so I have seen that is a huge game changer for most of our families of being able to access. Now, of course, there's still some areas that Wi-Fi and technology is still a barrier, so we need to work on that. Yeah, did I miss anything, Kathleen? You got it. Okay.
So you mentioned that you value culture and focus on meeting people where they are. I think this is for a village project. Excuse me. How does your culture-affirming services accommodate for language diversity? Do you provide bilingual services for young warriors and their families?
So yeah, we have, our practitioners look like the community, including language. And if we have a need for someone from a different culture, then we will tap into one of our partner agencies at the state level and have them provide the language barrier access that we would need. But we haven't found that to be a problem here in Monterey County. We have Spanish-speaking therapists, and language is definitely not a barrier at this point, I'm happy to say.
And at Ohana?
At Ohana, we do have Spanish-speaking providers. I will say that is something that we need to do better on. I know myself, when I moved to the county, I kind of was kicking myself for learning French and invested in learning Spanish. And I will say learning Spanish as an adult is quite humbling, but you can get much more receptive language acquisition. The uttering of the words is harder. But we utilize Language Line to have all families be able to access languages. We're really trying to think about the best way to deliver a group-based milieu kind of intervention and education when there's several different families of different language needs, and how to make sure everyone feels comfortable with the information they're getting in terms of the handouts as well as the receiving of the language. And so this is something that at Ohana, I do think in this county, given the language institutes in the area, we have so much opportunity in our community to be able to work with that. So we are definitely looking into getting more support in terms of in-person language support, because the Language Line, I don't know if you've ever worked with an interpreter over video interface. It is so much better than it was 10 years ago, but it's just not the same of having either someone who can speak comfortably, with a patient in front of them. Sorry, I use patient because I'm a doctor, but a patient in front of them. But when you have someone who is not only fluent in their language, but their culture, and can really get the meaning behind what both the family and the patient is saying to the provider, that just deepens the communication and the understanding. And when that is able to happen, care just is much more congruent and feels like you're dancing with a family rather than feeling like, oh, I'm not sure we're on the same page, or we're I'm not sure if that interpretation landed the way that I intended.
How do you share the knowledge you've gained with other communities in California and the U.S.? And this is for both groups.
Well, our knowledge currently is being shared all over the world right now because of our Inanyata research project. And so we've had interest from the Congressional Black Caucus around this particular, the 35 BIPOC LGBTQ plus survey, because it's like nothing that's ever happened in the country before. So and it's on websites at the state level, and when we go around and do presentations to senators and assembly people and state level funders and even focus groups.
Regina, use your microphone.
I'm sorry, focus groups throughout the state of California, because we're everywhere in California, because there's 35 groups, and there's a lot of interest in culturally congruent and affirming approaches to working with the various BIPOC populations in California.
And Hannah?
Yes, at Ohana, well, I will say that one of the missions of the privilege of receiving this gift is really to kind of curate a project and then disseminate so other areas, other counties that don't have the transformational gift can learn from our approach and take what we're doing and run with it. I don't know if I've emphasized enough, but in most insurance-based child mental health, family services and having family at the center of care is not the standard. It's kind of the exception. And so really at Ohana, we're trying to be innovative with that approach. And so we want to be generous with whatever knowledge we build. So actually, we have an internal data team that's working to collect all of our data so that we can, number one, know what we're doing, is it working? And then number two, how do we capture it so other communities can learn from our lessons? Currently, we have been kind of presenting more more of our specialty-related conferences. So presentations at ACAP, which is the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and so forth. But I will say there is a lot of national press about the project and the building. And so our Executive Director, Susan Swick, does not take that lightly and really kind of holds that very preciously and wants to really think about our project as a larger gift to the larger community and really share what we learn.
I have one last question. There is a question here, though, that the person who wrote it might want to come up and ask Caroline, because it's in the weeds. What is dialectic behavioral therapy? But rather than going into it, find you after. But my last question is, how can people get involved, either as clients, volunteers, or supporters?
So if you are wanting to seek therapy or one of our programs, just give us a call. Someone in the front office will speak with you. If you are looking for therapy, they'll fill out a waitlist form. Programs will connect you with the right person. We have an AmeriCorps volunteer coordinator, so if you would like to volunteer, if you have horse care experience, we'd love to have you at the ranch. If you want to work with students, we'd love to have you at our after school program. We also will be having a luncheon in July. So if you're interested and would like to be a table captain for the luncheon, please let me know or give the office a call and I will get back with you on that. That is one of our major annual fundraisers. If you want to just donate, you can go to our website or give us a call. But there are a lot of different ways to get involved. You know, just tell people about the organization and what we do. A lot of people come to us via word of mouth. And you know, they get to hear about how the organization has impacted them, so people then come to us. But just talking about the organization and what we do and what you know about us, sending people over.
So I have handouts at the table. So if you or anyone that you know needs care, please call Ohana. Everyone gets to be in touch with a clinical social worker to really listen to the needs and really start from day one connecting you with either tips, ideas, community services while we're getting the ball rolling in terms of our own evaluation process. I will say we're hiring, so anyone who wants a job at Ohana, check out our website. We are growing so much in the next year, and so we are really looking for people who are really enthusiastic working with patients and families and excited to be in kind of a startup environment where maybe there's no institutional, like, this is how we've always done it. It's more, we've never done this, what do you want to do? You know, we're looking for very excited individuals with various backgrounds. We're currently, our website has so many potential positions available. We also have a whole volunteer team, and our volunteers are so critical as well in terms of helping families navigate through Ohana, just reading, also providing art options in the waiting room and things like that. So if people want to volunteer, there's those options as well. So yes, Ohana wants to open our doors to people who feel really excited about, again, and passionate about working with children and families.
All right, great. I do have one last question that just came to me, and it's about people whose native language is different than English. This is from someone who's a therapist. As a therapist, I experience clients having a better chance of healing from childhood trauma if they told their stories in their native language, despite their fluency in English. I wonder if this reality is commonly known. And I will say, as a former psychotherapist, I've had that experience. And I don't know if either, any of you have had that, working with somebody whose childhood language was in a different language other than English. Even though I might not understand what they're saying. Have any of you had that experience?
I know historically our agency, we've been around for 16 years, and we've had people from other, like from the Kikkin language, and we are we know people in the community, so we contract with people that can keep confidentiality intact and bring them in to do the training. But there's nothing like having someone from that background be able to relate to the person. So that's definitely a challenge. The majority of our individuals speak Spanish when there is a language difference, but we have that problem solved. And then, we recently had a Afghani therapist that was able to work with that population. And so, but over the years we have had people from different languages come to us, and then that's how we generally resolve that without having to go to the language line, because it's not always the best place to, but we bring people into the facility and have them communicate with the person. So
I do think, with that window, the language is there's a window period for language, and if you introduce languages early on, that brain is a sponge, and then something happens at puberty where that window just kind of closes on us, and if you start learning a language after puberty, you're never going to speak fluently. And so I think so much of our emotions and our experiences are embedded in those early years. And so I think absolutely if someone is needing to convey or work with somebody who can work with them, being able to access that is so critical and crucial. I will say Language Line is a great second best. And as someone who's received care outside of the country and working with someone, it is so helpful to have access to translators, and I do think that can be it can lower a barrier. But when you're working with something so delicate as a therapy or specifically trauma, and if you're talking about an event that even happened in those early critical periods, I think for so many patients, I imagine it is quite crucial. And I do think there is something unspoken about being with someone who sees you and gets you and kind of can pick up on those subtle, like even the mannerisms of different cultures that I definitely have worked with cultures where I'm like, what was that head nod? And that you're like realizing there's so many nonverbal things that you might be missing. And so I do think that is really, really crucial. And so really developing our future healers and really investing in our community so that any person that is feeling compelled to enter the field of social work, or anyone feels empowered, that they have a place and there's someone who will feel really impacted by being able to work with someone.
And I just want to say one other thing about not just language, but we have a shortage of African American male therapists. Every therapist we have right now are female, and young African American males really could benefit. So one thing that is on the wish list is to identify some young African American males in the community to encourage them and support them through their education so that they can come back and be practitioners in our agencies.
So we are at the end of our time. Please join me in thanking our So we are at the end. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope I'll see you June 27th in July for another Gala fundraiser.